remember the trembling start of my afternoon as clearly as if I were watching a scene from a film playing in slow motion. My legs felt stiff with every step, and my breath came in shallow little bursts. The day had come, and no matter how my heart pounded or how many times I tried to talk myself out of it, I was resolved. I wore a simple outfit, soft jeans, a blouse that fell gracefully over my shoulders, and a scarf in a deep shade of teal. It had taken weeks of contemplation to settle on these pieces, each chosen for how they might make me feel less conspicuous. The final effect, though subtle, made me feel beautiful. I had been standing in front of the bedroom mirror that morning, struggling with a flutter of nerves. The reflection looking back at me was familiar, yet at the same time it felt foreign. The flickering excitement in my eyes might have been evident to anyone who truly knew me, but I was certain a stranger would just see someone carefully selecting clothes for a regular day. I tugged the scarf, smoothing its fringe, trying to banish the notion that the threads might somehow betray my panic. Was it too bright? Was it too attention-grabbing? My mind swirled with doubt. Eventually, I decided that it had exactly the right vibrancy to do what I hoped. Shine just enough to draw a comforting sense of confidence, not glaringly so, but enough to remind me that I was attempting something significant. As the hours ticked forward and the sun rose higher, the warm glow spilling into my small bedroom, I allowed myself a final look in the mirror. My makeup was delicate, neutral eyeshadow and a subtle gloss. I tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear, convinced that one look at my face would give me away, though I wasn't entirely sure what "give away" even meant in that moment. Even so, I lifted my chin and whispered, "It's now or never," trying to steady my voice. Growing up, I had often closed my bedroom door, hidden from my parents and my older sister, and experimented with outfits that let me explore pieces of my identity I couldn't otherwise show. My older sister Hannah lived away now, busy with her own life, and my parents were more or less oblivious to the smaller details of my adult life as long as I seemed happy. If they suspected anything, they never said so. My sister and I had once had a quiet conversation when I was younger, after she noticed that I had curiously eyed some of her clothes. Without making a big deal out of it, she had said, "Any style you gravitate toward is yours to discover. There's no rule about who can wear what, you know." She shrugged and added, "You never have to apologize for feeling good about what you wear." That casual conversation had lingered in my mind for years. Even though she never explicitly confirmed whether she understood the deeper meaning behind my interest, her comment gave me a steady reassurance that someone might be in my corner if I ever found the courage to talk about it. But that morning, the only corner I had was my own reflection. She, Claire, looked back with a mixture of hope and apprehension, so I slipped into my coat, grabbed my small purse, and carefully ventured out of the apartment. I hadn't exactly planned the route in detail, but I knew I wanted a place where I could sit quietly with a book, maybe bury my face in it if I felt overwhelmed. The bookstore cafe on the quieter side of downtown seemed perfect. It was neither too busy nor completely deserted. In my imagination, it was the kind of shop where I could wander the aisles, let the subtle scent of paper and brewed coffee calm my nerves, and then find a table to gather my thoughts. When I arrived, I paused outside, leaning against the exterior brick wall. Through the tall windows, I could see a handful of people browsing the shelves. A mother with her teenage daughter, a pair of college-aged friends flipping through art books, and two men hunched over a small table in earnest conversation. The baristas behind the counter were moving methodically, but the place had a light, airy feel, soft music and unobtrusive chatter. Normally, this environment would be my idea of a relaxing day. Today, though, I wasn't sure if I could even muster the courage to push the door open. Nevertheless, I took a breath, touched the fringe of my teal scarf, and pulled open the door. A gust of warm air enveloped me, carrying with it the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. My heart thundered. To my profound relief, no one turned to stare or gape. The mother-daughter pair flipped through a novel, oblivious to my arrival. The two men continued chatting, and one of the baristas was in the middle of blending a smoothie. Slowly, I made my way to the counter, fiddling with the strap of my purse as I scanned the chalkboard menu above. The woman behind the counter looked to be around my age, perhaps in her mid-20s, with short pink hair that framed her face. A large black apron swathed her torso, bearing the store's name in neat lettering. She locked eyes with me, flashed a professional but warm smile, and said, "Hi there, what can I get for you?" Trying to swallow the dryness in my throat, I said, "I'd like a medium cappuccino, please." My voice shook slightly, not enough to be dramatic, but enough for me to notice. She nodded, keyed in my order, and asked if I'd like any flavor shots. I shook my head, probably too quickly, and she rang me up. I handed her a few bills, got my change, and made my way to find a table. The entire transaction took less than a minute, but it felt like I was balancing on a tightrope the entire time. I found a table in the corner, mostly shielded from immediate view by a short shelf displaying paperback romances. Settling into the seat, I took a second to rest my hands on the small round table, focusing on the fact that I had done it. I had actually gone out in public, dressed in a way that felt true to me. Even if no one else noticed or cared, it was monumental for me. I pulled a slim novel out of my purse, something about an artist's journey set in Europe, and opened it. I wasn't actually reading, of course. My gaze flicked up every few seconds, convinced that somehow all eyes were on me. I studied random sentences, giving no real thought to their meaning, just trying to trick myself into believing I was calm. When the barista approached, I stiffened. She carried a small tray with my cappuccino on it, sporting a neat foam heart on top. She placed it in front of me gently. She was close enough that I could see a small crescent-shaped tattoo just below the sleeve of her uniform. Her eyes flicked over my outfit, lingering on the teal scarf. "I love your scarf, by the way," she said, smiling. "The color is gorgeous on you." The remark was a simple compliment, something casual that people offer each other daily, yet it might as well have been an entire fireworks display bursting inside my chest. My mouth went dry, and I managed a feeble, "Thanks." I couldn't recall the last time I had felt such an intense wave of emotion welling up behind my eyes. I clutched the edges of my novel and forced a smile, willing my hands not to shake. My mind whirled with chaotic delight, the realization that she had spoken directly to me, Claire, and recognized me in a positive way. It had nothing to do with whether I was passing or trying to be something I wasn't. It was a straightforward bit of warmth from one stranger to another, about nothing more complicated than a piece of clothing. She lingered a moment as if sensing I was uncertain, then offered another quick smile before pivoting to return behind the counter. In that moment, I felt tears prick my eyes. No one in the cafe seemed to even notice that I was on the verge of tears, which was probably for the best. My shoulders heaved in a silent exhale as I tried to absorb the enormity of what had just happened in the most benign of everyday gestures. I stayed there for nearly an hour. I sipped my cappuccino, occasionally flipping through pages. Most of the other patrons drifted in and out. The mother and daughter left, replaced by a lone man who parked himself on a couch and scrolled through his phone. The two friends who had been flipping art books moved to a table near the window, deep in conversation about their coursework. I admired that no one gave me a second glance. In a world where I had spent so long worrying that I'd be scrutinized at the smallest hint of difference, I found deep relief in the indifference. Meanwhile, that single compliment from the barista played over and over in my mind, a small spark lighting the corners of my usually anxious thoughts. When I finally mustered the resolve to leave, I made sure to return my mug to the front counter. The pink-haired barista was wiping it down. She looked up as I approached, recognized me from earlier, and gave a soft grin. "Have a nice day," she said, voice friendly in the quiet store. Not trusting myself to speak without letting my voice break, I simply nodded and headed for the exit, hurrying to slip through the door before I lost my composure entirely. Stepping outside, I let the chill air wash over me and realized I was smiling like a fool. I hurried along the sidewalk, occasionally passing strangers going about their routines. I made a beeline for my apartment, realizing that I didn't want to risk running into anyone I knew just yet. My phone buzzed in my purse as I walked, but I ignored it. It could wait. All that mattered was preserving the fragile glow that radiated from within. My feet carried me with a brisk, eager pace, as though I were chasing after a new horizon I hadn't realized existed. Once I was safely back in my bedroom, I set down my purse on the small table by the window. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye again. There was an unmistakable softness to my face, a flicker of pride or relief, I wasn't sure which. I stared for a long time before the adrenaline began to subside and left behind exhaustion. My phone buzzed once more, so I finally grabbed it and saw it was my sister calling. "Hello?" I answered, taking a seat on the edge of my bed. "Hey, you busy?" Hannah asked, sounding upbeat. "Not really," I said, swallowing the dryness in my mouth. "What's up?" "I was thinking about coming by next weekend. My schedule is finally clear. I'd love to catch up." She paused, maybe noticing the tension in my voice. "You sound different. Is everything okay?" I realized I was still gripping the phone too tightly. In a calmer tone, I lied. "I'm just a bit tired. Didn't sleep much." "Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into a conversation if you're about to crash," she said. "But let me know if everything's all right." Part of me wanted to say, "You'll never guess what I did today. I went to a cafe dressed as the person I've always wanted to be." Instead, I said, "I'm good, promise. And yeah, come by next weekend. I'll make dinner or something." With that, we hung up, and I was left alone with an odd mixture of emotions, excitement, and an undercurrent of guilt at not confiding in my sister. She'd been my role model for so long, her casual reassurance so many years ago forming a bright corner in my mind. I remembered how that tiny conversation, "You never have to apologize," had meant so much. And yet, I couldn't form the words to tell her now. For that day, at least, the experience was mine alone to cradle. That night, sleep eluded me. My thoughts kept drifting back to the barista's voice. I could practically hear her, that faint ring of kindness directed at me. However fleeting, it was enough to pulse through my mind. Eventually, I allowed myself the peace of that memory. It was just a small snippet in an otherwise ordinary day, but it helped me close my eyes and drift off with a soft smile resting on my lips. In the morning, I found myself feeling strangely energized, as if the small success of not being scrutinized had granted me a new sense of freedom. I made a quick breakfast, telling myself I had to get some errands done. The very notion of stepping out again as Claire made my stomach flutter with both excitement and apprehension, but I convinced myself it might be too soon. Instead, I pulled on a more neutral outfit, satisfied to remain in the safety of old habits for a day. Yet, as I walked to the grocery store to replenish my fridge, I found myself noticing every reflection in windows, every glance from passing pedestrians. I would look at people's outfits and wonder how I might emulate them or adapt them in a way that would feel right the next time I summoned enough courage to dress as I had. Each casual person, hurrying to catch the bus or leisurely strolling with a shopping bag, became a silent model for possibilities I had spent too many years pretending didn't exist. By the time I got home and put the groceries away, I felt a fresh spark of motivation. The memory of the teal scarf lingered in the back of my mind. I dug through my dresser until I found it and traced my fingers along the fabric. In a fit of excitement, I rummaged for my phone. My sister had taught me how to style different scarves once upon a time, and I used to joke that I was hopeless. I found a message thread with her name. "Hey Hannah, random question. Remember when you taught me all those ways to wear a scarf, like the different knots and loops? Think you could show me again next weekend? I kind of forgot." I hit send and immediately wondered if that gave away too much. But a moment later, she replied with a cheerful message. "Sure, I'd love to. I'll bring a few of mine. Always happy to help. BTW, are you okay? This is random, but I'm proud that you're taking an interest again. No worries if you don't want to talk about it. See you soon." My cheeks heated up, but I grinned. She didn't pry. She simply extended support, just like she had years ago. I typed back a quick thank you and left it at that. Perhaps it was a sign that she always knew more than she let on. Days slipped by with the usual routine: work, chores, the occasional phone call. I found my mind wandering often, replaying that pivotal moment in the cafe. At the office, I would occasionally feel a pang of longing, an urge to express more than my usual monotone wardrobe. But I had a conservative job, an environment where I wasn't sure how bold I could be. Instead, I'd pass the time imagining the next weekend, when my sister would visit, trying to decide if I felt brave enough to reveal my new experiences, or if I'd downplay them as a passing curiosity in scarves. Finally, the day arrived. I cleaned my apartment meticulously, wanting everything to be perfect. Hannah arrived with a small suitcase in tow. She greeted me with a wide smile, enveloping me in a warm hug. She had always been the more outspoken one in the family, the type to strike up a conversation at the grocery checkout without a hint of shyness. "Been a while," she said, shrugging off her light jacket. "I like what you've done with this place. Cozy?" She was wearing jeans, boots, and a casual blouse, her usual combination, accompanied by a large patterned scarf around her neck, just as she'd promised. We settled into the living room, a few mugs of tea on the coffee table. I could see she had brought several scarves in her suitcase, all different colors and styles. She patted the seat next to her, a gesture for me to join her. "So, want a refresher on scarf fashion?" she asked, an impish grin forming. "Or is there something else on your mind?" I let out a slow breath, staring at the teacup in my hands as wisps of steam rose. "We can start with the scarf," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Baby steps." "Fair enough." She plucked a deep burgundy scarf from her collection and began demonstrating. "Loop it once around the back, then cross it like this in front. There's a basic knot. If you want a fancier look, you twist the ends before looping them again. See?" Her hands worked deftly, and I watched her with an intensity that made me self-conscious. I wanted to absorb every detail this time. Each demonstration seemed to stir something in me, a thrill of possibility for my own evolving style. After a few minutes, she handed me the scarf and guided my fingers, showing me how to replicate each move. It felt intimately familiar, like a memory from childhood revisited. I remembered her teaching me similar things so many years ago, but back then I'd pretended it was mere sibling fun. Now there was more to it, and I wondered if she sensed that as well. When I finally succeeded in tying a neat twist, she clapped her hands. "You're a pro now. You won't need me anymore." I gave her a faint smile, trying to gather the courage to speak. "Actually, I need to tell you something." She paused, setting the scarves aside. "You know you can tell me anything. Are you okay?" The concern in her eyes was real, and my heart pounded. I debated how to phrase it, stumbling over possible words. "I've been trying something," I said hesitantly. "I recently went out dressed differently. Not just a scarf. I mean, wearing clothes that helped me feel more complete in how I present myself. Her expression softened, and she placed a comforting hand on my arm. "I'm listening." With that, the story spilled out of me. I described my apprehension, the jumbled anxiety, how I had chosen the bookstore cafe, the teal scarf, and the barista's small act of kindness. I explained how it felt to be recognized in that moment, not as someone to be judged or questioned, but as a person worthy of a simple compliment. The whole time my voice trembled, and I worried she'd interject with surprise or confusion. Instead, she only listened, her eyes reflecting compassion. When I finished, my shoulders were tense. The wordless hush settled over us until she finally said, "Thank you for trusting me with this." She squeezed my hand gently. "I always suspected you might be drawn to expressing yourself in different ways. Remember years ago how you would watch me try on outfits?" She smiled a little. "I noticed. I just didn't want to scare you away." I blinked, tears threatening to form at the corners of my eyes. "Yeah, I remember that. I didn't know if you were just being nice, or if you understood what it meant to me." "I wasn't entirely sure what it meant at the time," she admitted, "but I wanted you to feel comfortable, and I'm here for you now too. How about we go shopping together? Unless that's too much for you right now, but it might be easier with someone by your side." A rush of relief surged through me, and I nodded, a mixture of gratitude and anticipation swirling in my chest. "That sounds really good, actually. I'd love it." We ended up strolling through a mid-range clothing store later that day. Hannah insisted on making it a casual outing, not a forced expedition. She guided me toward racks with subtle designs, letting me pick out items that caught my eye. I admired a blouse in a floral pattern, then quickly slipped it back on the rack, uncertain. "You like it?" she asked, plucking it off the hanger again. "It's a bit bold," I said, running a finger along the gentle fabric. "I'm worried I'll stand out too much." She glanced around the store where others were shopping. A few couples, a few single individuals. Nobody was paying us any attention. "Sometimes standing out can be a good thing," she teased, draping it over my arm. "Try it on. If you hate it, we'll move on." In the fitting room, I found myself hesitating outside the door, scanning the corridor for any suspicious looks. It wasn't a particularly busy afternoon, so we had space to breathe. I tried on the blouse, and Hannah stood just outside, waiting. I stared at my reflection. The floral pattern was indeed noticeable, but it wasn't garish. In a quieter, simpler period of my life, I might have admired it from afar and never dared to put it on. Yet here I was, wearing it, and the reflection looking back at me, though anxious, felt more alive. Hannah's voice drifted through the door. "How's it going?" I opened the door slightly, letting her peek in. She immediately beamed. "That's lovely. Do you like it?" I took a small breath and nodded. "I do. It's actually really nice." "Then get it," she said simply, with that same matter-of-fact tone she'd used years ago when telling me I never had to apologize for how I dressed. We ended up purchasing a handful of items, a practical skirt, a couple of blouses, and even another scarf. Nothing extravagant, but every piece felt like a tangible step forward. As we walked out of the store, she linked arms with me. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. The sincerity in her voice made me want to cry, but I held it together, quietly thanking her. That evening, back in my apartment, we set out the new clothes, talking about potential outfits for various scenarios. It felt surreal to have someone there with me, not just in passive support but actively encouraging me. At one point, I confided in her about my lingering fears, how I was petrified of being seen by coworkers, how I worried about how friends from high school might react, or how our parents would handle it if they knew. She nodded and listened, repeating in various ways that I didn't owe anyone an explanation for how I presented myself. I realized that I still had a long, uncertain road ahead, but it was less lonely now. The next day, Hannah had to leave, so I found myself alone again. The new clothes hung neatly in my closet, beckoning me. I considered the possibility of returning to that bookstore cafe, wearing something that expressed my taste a bit more boldly. My pulse quickened at the thought, recalling the small sense of triumph I had felt from that barista's compliment. I decided to wait a few days, wanting to process everything. Then, on a Saturday afternoon, I took a deep breath, carefully applied my makeup, and styled my hair. I slipped into the floral blouse and paired it with dark jeans, stepping into low-heeled boots. My teal scarf was draped over a hanger by the door, but at the last second, I decided not to wear it. I wanted something new, something that made me feel like I was moving forward. I selected the new scarf Hannah had helped me purchase, a soft gray one with a faint silver thread pattern woven in. I tied it in a simple knot, grabbing my purse and heading out. The walk to the bookstore cafe was just as nerve-wracking as the first time, but I felt slightly better prepared. My cheeks still warmed at the thought of stepping inside, but I clung to the realization that no one had paid me the slightest negative attention before. I had every reason to expect another smooth visit. This time the cafe was a bit more crowded. A small group stood at the counter, and the baristas were busily filling orders. I joined the line and tried not to fidget visibly, gazing at the pastry display or glimpsing the shelves of books behind me. Eventually, I made it to the front. It wasn't the pink-haired barista from my first visit, but a younger man who wore a friendly expression. "What can I get for you?" he asked. "Just a latte, medium," I replied, my voice a notch steadier than it had been that first time. I glanced around, wondering if she was working that day. Once I was handed my drink, I scouted the seating area. The corner table from last time was taken, so I had to settle for a small round table near the center of the space, which was definitely more exposed than I would have preferred. I sank into the chair, heart pounding again. Could people see me clearly now? Would they notice I was shaking? For a few minutes I only stared at the latte, letting the swirl of foam calm me with its delicate pattern. Then I spotted her. The barista with the pink hair emerged from the back, carrying a fresh container of milk toward the front counter. She wore the same black apron, her gaze scanning the cafe. Our eyes locked briefly, and she gave a friendly nod. I had the urge to wave, but that seemed silly. Instead, I offered a small smile and looked away, pretending to be fascinated by my latte. Moments later, I heard her voice, bright and cheerful, as she greeted another customer. I tried to refocus on the novel I'd brought, but my mind kept wandering. Time drifted on. People came and went, and I settled in, doing my best to enjoy the calm atmosphere. Eventually, I realized I needed to stretch my legs, so I stood and headed over to the bookshelves. That was the beauty of this cafe. The bookstore portion was just as enticing as the coffee. I circled around a display of literary classics, occasionally picking up a title to read the blurb. At one point, I heard a voice behind me. "Need any help finding something?" I turned to see the pink-haired barista standing there. She must have finished whatever task she'd been doing behind the counter. She offered a wide, genuine smile. "We've got a pretty big selection, so if you're looking for a certain author or genre, I might be able to steer you in the right direction." "Thanks," I said, returning the smile but feeling my cheeks flush. "I'm mostly browsing. I like historical fiction, and sometimes memoirs, just looking for a title that jumps out at me." She nodded thoughtfully. "That's my jam too. We recently got a new shipment of historical fiction in the display near the back corner. If you want, I can point you to it." She paused as if she recognized me. "You've been here before, right? You look familiar." My stomach flipped, but I tried to answer casually. Yeah, I came by maybe a couple weeks ago. Her face brightened in recognition. Oh, you had the teal scarf, right? I remember complimenting it. It really suited you. She nodded as though she was now certain I was the same person. You found another nice scarf, I see. My hand flew up to the soft gray fabric at my neck. Yeah, I like scarves. I felt a little silly at such an obvious statement, but she only chuckled. They're a great accessory, she said with a shrug. Makes an outfit pop. Also, your makeup is on point today. I'm kind of jealous because I always mess up my eyeliner. Her light-hearted tone put me at ease. This was just casual conversation, with not a hint of judgment. Thank you, I said, a bit of nervous laughter escaping. I hesitated, then added, I'm still learning a lot, so I wouldn't say I'm great at it. Well, you're nailing it in my opinion, she said. Anyway, let me show you that section. With that, she walked ahead, leading me down one of the aisles to a small display near the rear of the store. I followed, noticing that her movements were unhurried, as though she genuinely wanted to help and not just go through the motions of customer service. She stopped in front of a row of spines arranged by the release date. Here we are, some new ones, some classics in reprinted editions. This might be where you'll find what you're looking for. I scanned the titles, letting my fingers brush one about an 18th century figure. Thanks, I said. I appreciate it. No problem. If you need anything else, just wave me down, she said, gesturing lightly as she moved to head back to the front. Then she glanced over her shoulder. And if you have any makeup tips, I'm all ears. I really do struggle sometimes. She laughed at her own admission. I smiled back. I'll keep that in mind. She left, and I found myself exhaling deeply. It was only a few moments of conversation, but it felt like a gateway to a version of social interaction I'd always longed for. Straightforward, comfortable, and not weighed down by suspicion or second-guessing. I spent some time perusing the books, eventually choosing one that caught my interest. Satisfied, I returned to my table, noticing that my latte was now lukewarm, but that hardly mattered. I felt lighter, as if a small weight had lifted from my chest. A bit later, I finished what remained of my drink, took the new book to the front desk, and prepared to leave. The pink-haired barista was helping another customer, so I just quietly slipped out. Still, the sense of connection lingered. I walked home in a state of mild euphoria, a bizarre mixture of the mundane, purchasing a new historical fiction novel, and the extraordinary, being recognized and welcomed for who I was without drama. For the next few weeks, that store became my go-to spot whenever I felt brave enough. Sometimes I wore the teal scarf, other times I switched it up. Each visit, I grew more at ease. Sometimes the pink-haired barista, whose name tag I finally learned read Allie, would wave in greeting or strike up a short chat about something trivial. I occasionally let slip small hints about my life, though not too many details. She told me about a local open mic night she performed at once a month, where she recited poetry. It was all casual, but it was more than I ever thought possible, a place where I could spend time as the version of myself I needed to be. One late afternoon, while flipping through a book, I felt a presence at my table. It was Allie again, her shift seemingly done, as she was now without an apron and had thrown on a light jacket. She gave me a friendly smile and said, "I'm off the clock. Mind if I join you for a second?" My heart gave a jolt, but I nodded. Not at all. She settled into the chair across from me and propped her chin on her hand. "I notice you come here quite a bit," she said. "It's cool. I like seeing familiar faces. You're always reading something interesting or wearing something stylish. So, I was just curious. Do you live nearby?" I tried to steady my voice. "Yeah, not too far. Just a short walk away." Then I tensed, worried that I was giving away too much personal info. But she didn't press further. She only nodded in interest. Nice. I live on the other side of the neighborhood. Anyway, I was about to grab a quick coffee for myself and then head out. Wanted to see if you'd be interested in checking out our open mic night next week. I mentioned it a while back. It's at this little lounge a few blocks away. I do some poetry. Other people play guitar, read short stories, that kind of thing. It's pretty relaxed. No pressure, but I think you might enjoy it. My immediate reaction was panic. Step outside my comfort zone even further, in a place I'd never been, surrounded by new people? On the other hand, the invitation warmed me. Wow, that's really nice of you. I've never gone to something like that before. Well, you can always just come hang out and watch. No performing necessary, she assured me, a spark of humor in her eyes. Unless you secretly write poems or something, in which case you should totally sign up for the open mic. I let out a small laugh. I think I'll just watch for now. Cool, she said. If you show up, I'll introduce you to some friends. We're usually a pretty laid-back group. She scribbled down a time and address on a small slip of paper, then handed it to me. 7 o'clock next Thursday. They usually let me go early from work that day, so if you arrive a bit after 7, you might catch me on stage, she said with a mock grand gesture, rolling her eyes at her own comedic exaggeration. I took the slip, feeling my nerves fray at the edges. I appreciate it. I'll consider it. She patted the table lightly, a friendly gesture, then stood up. Hope to see you there, she said, grabbing her jacket and heading out. I watched her leave, my heart pounding from both the surprise and the possibility. For so long, I had avoided putting myself in any situation that might spark questions or stares. But now, I was entertaining the idea of attending a small community event in my chosen attire. Despite my anxiety, part of me burned with the desire to say yes. If I had taken the leap to visit this cafe, maybe I could handle something slightly bigger. That evening, I sat on my couch, turning the slip of paper over in my hand. If I were to go, what would I wear? My mind conjured images of me stepping into a cozy lounge, feeling the hush that falls when someone takes the stage for poetry, nursing a warm drink while I tried not to let my pulse overwhelm me. Even the mental image sent a thrilling chill down my spine. On Thursday, my nerves were coiled so tightly that I nearly talked myself out of going. I'd been turning over the possibility all week, to the point of exhaustion. That afternoon, I rushed home from the office, rummaged through my clothes, and finally chose an outfit. A loose dark sweater, a skirt that flowed just above my knees, and my comfortable ankle boots. I debated whether to wear the teal scarf or the gray one. At last, I selected the teal, the one that had first drawn Allie's compliment. It felt symbolic, a connection to the day my perspective had changed. Stepping outside, I reminded myself that I was an adult, free to explore the world however I saw fit. Yet my palms grew clammy on the walk to the lounge. Before turning the final corner, I had to pause and lean against a street lamp to steady my breathing. "You can do this," I murmured. A few passers-by glanced my way, but no one seemed particularly concerned. Pressing my lips together, I forced myself to keep moving, finally spotting the sign for the lounge, a simple neon display in the shape of a microphone. The space inside was dim but inviting. Warm light glowed from small lamps on the tables. A makeshift stage, a raised platform with a microphone stand, occupied one corner. About 10 or 15 people were scattered about, some with guitars, some with notebooks. A few looked like they'd just come in from nearby apartments or coffee shops. I recognized Allie sitting at a table near the front, her pink hair a beacon. She was talking animatedly with a few people. My chest tightened at the thought of approaching her. Nevertheless, I wove through the small crowd, stopping just short of her table. She turned, spotted me, and broke into a beaming smile. "You made it!" she exclaimed, standing up to greet me. I managed a slightly shaky laugh. "I did. I almost bailed, but here I am." She introduced me to her friends, a woman named B, who had a black notebook brimming with short stories, a tall guy named Marcus, who played acoustic guitar, and a younger man named Rafi, who did comedic spoken word. They all greeted me like they already knew me, so casual and welcoming that I felt a flicker of relief. None of them batted an eye at how I presented myself, nor asked me any leading questions. Instead, they simply said it was great that I came and offered me a seat. A small hush eventually settled as the first performer took the stage, reading a heartfelt poem about city life. The room quieted to respectful silence, punctuated by applause when the performer finished. Allie tapped my shoulder, whispering that she'd be up soon. As more performances went by, I found myself relaxing. Nobody appeared to be judging anyone else. It was just a group of creative souls eager to share. I realized how lucky I was to have stumbled into an environment where individual expression was valued rather than dissected. When Allie was called, she walked up to the microphone, pulling out a single sheet of paper. She gave a quick wave to the audience and began to read a poem about finding color in a world that sometimes feels gray. The words felt oddly relevant to my own journey. She spoke of a simple spark of brightness that can transform an entire day. The sincerity in her voice was captivating. It was just a few minutes, but when she finished, the applause filled the small lounge. She caught my eye, and her cheeks tinted pinker than her hair under the stage lights. After a few more acts, the open mic portion ended, and soft background music resumed. People chatted at their tables, complimenting each other's performances. Allie returned to our group, a grin splitting her face. "That was terrifying," she admitted, sinking into her chair. "You seemed so confident," I said, sincerity in my tone. She let out a nervous giggle. "Looks can be deceiving, right?" The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. We could never truly know what was going on beneath someone's exterior. For a split second, I pictured myself telling her everything, why I was so nervous, how monumental it was to be out in a social setting as Claire. But I kept it inside for now. It was enough that she had invited me, enough that I was there. The conversation flowed, weaving through various topics: the best coffee shops in town, the strangest jobs people had held, random anecdotes about the city's nightlife. At one point, Marcus asked me, "So, what brings you to our little corner of the creative scene?" I shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Just looking for a place where I can, be around artistic folks, maybe get some inspiration." It wasn't a lie. I found the artistic energy refreshing, even though my main reason for coming was simply that Allie had extended a friendly hand. "You should totally read something next time," Bea encouraged me, tapping her notebook. "Even if it's just a paragraph, it's liberating, trust me." I coughed nervously. "I'm not sure about that, but maybe someday." At the end of the night, as people began to trickle out, Allie turned to me. "Need a walk home? I'm heading in that general direction." Part of me wanted to say yes, to extend the warmth of the evening, but I also wanted a moment to process alone. "That's sweet of you, but I think I'm okay on my own. I live just a few blocks down." She nodded, looking neither offended nor pushy. "All right. Well, thanks for coming. This was fun." I left with a small wave, the color and glow of the lounge still bright in my mind. The crisp night air nipped at my face as I walked the quiet streets home. Instead of the usual heaviness of fear that accompanied me when I went out dressed as Claire, I felt a subdued lightness. There would still be challenges, awkward conversations, and worries about how old friends or family might react. but I no longer carried the solitary ache that had weighed me down for so long. I knew there were people in the world who saw me, Claire, and were perfectly okay with it. A few days later, I found myself in another conversation with my sister. We'd been texting back and forth, discussing a possible dinner for the upcoming weekend. I casually mentioned meeting some new friends and even hinted that one of them was a barista. As expected, Hannah jumped on that detail. "Ooh, barista friend? Is there something there?" I rolled my eyes at my phone, smiling. "No, not like that," I typed. "Just someone who's been kind." "Kind is good," she replied. "It's nice to have people who make you feel comfortable, especially now. I can't wait to see your new outfits in person. Maybe we should have a bigger outing sometime, just the two of us. Or maybe I can meet these friends of yours." The mention of a bigger outing gave me a little jolt of nerves, but I couldn't deny that it also excited me. The bookstore cafe and the open mic lounge had offered me glimpses of a broader horizon, and I wanted to see more. "Absolutely," I texted back. "One step at a time, but I'm up for it." That weekend, Hannah came over again. This time, I told her I wanted to show her the lounge where I'd gone. We decided on an afternoon visit, even though the open mic wasn't happening that day. We just wanted to check out the space in daylight. I dressed in a casual blouse and jeans, but with a pair of flat shoes that matched the shade of teal in my scarf, a new habit that was becoming less nerve-wracking with each outing. Hannah wore a gray sweater and her own scarf, a floral pattern that offset her bright smile. We headed out, and although I felt a surge of nerves leading her to a spot where someone might recognize me, I trusted that this was the right step. When we arrived, the lounge was mostly empty, just a bartender setting up for the evening. But the space was open, the mild light streaming through the front windows. Hannah wandered around, taking it all in. I showed her the stage, the tables, and she admired the casual warmth of the place. "It's cozy," she said, spinning slowly to absorb the details. "I can see why you liked it here." "Yeah," I said softly. I felt at ease. Everybody was just there to share something they cared about, no pretense. She nodded, and we sat at one of the small tables. The bartender came over to ask if we wanted anything. We just asked for water, not planning to stay long. But then, as we sipped, I realized how significant it was to be here with my sister, showing her this side of my life, bridging the gap between my private self and the people who had supported me. Hannah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm happy for you," she said simply, glancing at my outfit in a way that conveyed a silent approval. "I don't know if you need to hear it again, but I am. You look comfortable." Her words caused a subtle warmth in my chest. "Thank you," I murmured, blinking quickly to keep my eyes dry. We left the lounge soon after, strolling around the neighborhood. The two of us ended up passing near the bookstore cafe, so I couldn't resist taking her inside. It was busier than usual, full of weekend shoppers. We waited in line, giggling over the pastries in the display case. Then, to my surprise, I saw Allie behind the register, chatting with a customer. My stomach flipped at the idea of introducing her to my sister, but part of me also thought it might be nice. Once we got to the front, Allie's gaze flickered to me, recognition lighting her face. "Hey there," she greeted. "How are you?" I smiled, feeling Hannah's curious stare on my shoulder. "Doing well. This is my sister Hannah. She's visiting for the weekend." Allie offered a little wave. "Nice to meet you. Your sibling here is a regular. Best scarf collection I've ever seen." Hannah laughed. "I can believe that. I might have played a small role in that collection." Allie nodded. "That's awesome. You two want coffee?" We placed our orders, and I could see Hannah appraising Allie with subtle curiosity. Once the drinks were done, we moved aside to let the next person in line order. Hannah and I took seats at a nearby table. While we chatted, Allie disappeared into the back, only to reappear a few minutes later, this time approaching our table for a quick break. "You folks mind if I say hi for a minute? My co-worker's covering the counter." "Sure," I said, smiling. My sister introduced herself more formally, and the three of us made small talk. At some point, Hannah said, "Thanks for being so nice to my sibling. I live a few hours away, and it's great to see them meet friendly people here." Allie shrugged, as though it was no big deal. "I just try to treat people like I'd want to be treated. They've also been super supportive of my poetry, so I appreciate that." She gave me a playful wink. We shared a light laugh. Then she checked the time on her phone, muttered something about needing to get back to the espresso machine, and excused herself with a wave. After she left, Hannah watched her go, then turned to me with a knowing smile. "She's lovely. Are you sure there's nothing going on there?" I blushed. "She's just a friend. We've hung out once or twice, but it's not like that." Hannah reached across and patted my hand. "Whatever it is, romantic or not, I'm happy you found people who are kind. That's what matters." The rest of the afternoon was spent drifting through the shelves, picking out a book or two, and laughing over random anecdotes from our childhood. By the time Hannah had to depart, I felt a tinge of sadness, but also a thrill at the realization that my life had become more open, more shared. She left me with a hug and a reminder that if I ever needed a shopping buddy or a confidant, I could call her anytime. I walked back to my apartment alone, but instead of feeling isolated, I felt accompanied by a sense of possibility. In the following weeks, my routine evolved. Some mornings, I would still slip into my more neutral attire for the office. Other evenings, I'd shift into the clothes that expressed what was hidden within me for so long. The boundaries between those two parts of my life started to blur in comfortable ways. I continued to visit the lounge, occasionally hearing Allie perform a new poem. I met more people from that circle, artists, musicians, folks who had always felt a little outside the mainstream. I listened to their stories, recognized common threads of anxiety and longing, and discovered that they had all faced insecurities in one form or another. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel as though I had to pretend. When I stepped onto the sidewalk wearing the outfits I favored, I worried less about stares. Sure, sometimes a stranger might give me a puzzled look, or a neighbor might blink twice before offering a tentative smile, but the earth didn't shatter. My world continued to revolve, and along the way, I found moments of brightness that outweighed the fear. One evening, after attending another poetry session, Allie and I took a walk through the quiet streets, the glow of streetlights punctuating the darkness. She tucked her hands in her jacket pockets, and I let my scarf flutter in the breeze. She asked me how I had found my style, how I'd gotten into wearing scarves and blending them with different outfits. I hesitated, deciding how much I wanted to share. Slowly, I revealed a bit more, that I used to be terrified to dress in a way that felt truer to me, that I worried about what others might think. I didn't go into explicit details about all my past anxieties, but I opened up enough that she nodded with understanding. She told me about her own struggles with bright hair, how she was constantly criticized by relatives who said it wasn't professional, and how the day she got that pink dye job had felt like a personal milestone. It was a simple conversation, but it felt oddly significant. Both of us had faced concerns about how others would perceive us. We walked until we reached an intersection where we had to part ways. She gave me a friendly pat on the shoulder, said, "I'll see you soon," and we went in opposite directions. I watched her retreating figure, reflecting on the chance encounters that can open entire new chapters in a life. Back at my apartment, I sank onto the couch, letting the events of the past weeks wash over me. The journey from trembling in a corner seat at the bookstore cafe to strolling the streets with Allie felt surreal. I picked up my phone, noticing a string of messages, one from Hannah, one from a coworker reminding me of an upcoming project, and one from an old friend I'd half lost touch with over the years. I knew there was still a world of decisions ahead. There would be times I'd have to figure out how to balance my expressions at work, or when to be more direct with the people in my life about who I was. But the difference was that I no longer felt trapped. The same scarf that once symbolized a deep anxiety now felt like a banner for the quiet courage I had mustered. I understood that small, genuine compliments, like the one I'd received from Allie that very first day, could tilt an entire perspective, letting in a sliver of hope that maybe I didn't have to hide in the shadows. I gently fingered the fringe of my teal scarf. A memory flashed. Allie placing my cappuccino on that small table and smiling, telling me the color looked gorgeous. Such a mundane moment in the grand scheme of things, yet enormous enough to keep me afloat in times of doubt. If a single stranger's remark could bring that much light, what else might I find out there, now that I was no longer quite so afraid? I set the scarf aside and let the hush of the apartment surround me. I thought of my sister's supportive grin, Allie's easygoing acceptance, the new acquaintances who invited me to share in their music, art, and poetry. Tiredness pulled at me, but I felt that quiet sense of fulfillment. I kicked off my shoes, changed into comfortable pajamas, and slid into bed. As my eyelids grew heavy, I held on to the promise that there were more corners of this world to explore, corners where I could walk in as Claire without second-guessing my right to be there. And that promise, discovered in the simple setting of a bookstore cafe, now felt a lot less fragile.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.